Hello and welcome to another open source workplace video. Today I'm very happy to have Andrew Mawson back with us. I think this is week 3 or 4, Andrew. I can't remember which it is, but I want to thank you for joining us again today.
No, it's a pleasure, Steve. It's good to see you. Speaking from the shed at the bottom of the garden today. So
Nice that I can see you're dressed appropriately for being working in the shed. Maybe this is just your work away uniform, and
it is indeed, indeed. It's
did
one
you?
of the great benefits of not having to get up and go into town and do all those sorts of things. You can put some easy clothes on in the morning, and you can sort of get straight at it. That's what I tend to do.
There you go. There you go. And obviously, so speaking about that, getting working at home, and there's been a lot
Mm,
of publicity this week with the likes of Google, Facebook,
mm,
announcing that they're not going to bring staff home. They're going to allow staff to work from home until the end of the year, and they're
yeah,
anticipating only 80% of their employees will go back to the office. And then Twitter announcing that they will allow employees to work from home for as long as they want to, and not require anyone to come back. And
mm.
sort of a couple of questions come to mind with this is, one is, are organizations maybe moving too quickly to make these decisions, do you think?
I'm not so sure they are really. I mean, I think what's beginning to dawn on people, particularly senior leaders, is that working from home and having the home as part of the overall workplace strategy is actually a very reasonable thing to do. I mean, we know from the studies that we do with our clients that people are actually, gagging for it. Not everybody, but on a typical project, when one of the things we do is a thing we call a profile. It's an online survey, really, and in that we usually find there's about 2 or 3% of people want to work at home all the time. But when you start asking the question of, 2 to 3 days a week, the number goes up dramatically. It's almost always more than 50%. So many of these companies are knocking on an open door, and I think what is clear is that many leaders who perhaps have been the barrier to this movement are seeing that this is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and they are surprised that their people aren't all out swinging the lead. People are actually working pretty hard, and those of us who've been working in this model for a long time, and this has been our model since we started. So our team work like this all the time, and we have done for 28 years. You realize that it can be a very intense way of working, because you're able to start when you want to start, and you're continually on Teams calls or Zoom calls or whatever. And sometimes the difficulty is that, particularly if you're working in a kind of global context, your day can start early, and if you don't manage it, it can end late. So you can become very, very tired very quickly. So I think people are just beginning to see that this is an opportunity for the business and for the people. I think the real trick, though, is that I'm convinced that people are in their honeymoon period on this, and you only have to go back a few years to look at what happened with Yahoo and Melissa Mayer and all that sort of good stuff, to realize that it's not simply a question of just giving people laptops and sending them home and giving them Zoom accounts. I mean, once the sort of the icing has sort of dissipated a bit on this, I think people are going to start to realize that actually you do need to do quite a lot of things differently. There were new understandings and new enhanced skills from a leadership standpoint you need to have, and also from what we would call workership, because I don't think this is all about leaders. This is about individuals taking control and taking responsibility for relationships they have, for how well they are trusted. Um, there are lots of things that you now need to do much more consciously that you didn't have to do before.
Mm,
Yeah,
a lot, lot,
so
lot.
so lots to do, I think, to solidify this kind of gain that companies have made.
And you,
Yeah.
you touched on a lot of things there, and obviously these are things that I think organizations are conscious of, right? Because you bring people back to the office, those things are taken for granted that they all are active in within the office environment.
Mm,
But then at the same time, they see the likes of Google, Facebook, employees are going, well, why can't we have this? What
mm.
sort of questions or tools? I think questions is probably the best way. Should leaders be asking themselves, or teams that are looking at this, what questions should they be asking themselves to sort of come to the right decision for them.
Well, you mean the right decision in terms of what they should have by way of a
What
workplace and what they should
yeah,
have? Well, I mean, I
yeah,
think that, you know, we've isolated about 10 different reasons why you might want to have a workplace, um, and, you know, quite legitimately. And I think I mean, we've got some leaders, I think, are kind of getting carried away with this a bit and saying, crikey, this is all working. Why do we need an office at all? And in some cases that may be legitimate, but in most cases it's not. You're going to need something. But I think what you've got to do now is to look forensically at the organization and what its particular needs are, and to work out exactly what you do need. So I mean, the sort of 10 things that we've identified. So if you need to have people working together on things that are very fast moving, where you're fusing a variety of different skills, you know, you're probably best having those people together. You know, there's a lot of information that flows and a lot of understandings that flow without you having to do stuff online. So I think that's number one. Number two is obviously where there's some regulatory or security requirement. You know, you can't get away from that. Number three is where you've got some equipment that people need and they can't manage without it. You know, so, and there are a few others which are as critical as that. And then you've got the sort of situation where, well, you've got part of your population actually wants to be out of their home, because they are, you know, they've got small flats and they don't want to work it, or they've got the personality that, you know, it doesn't work really for that, or there's some distraction in the home, which is kind of, so in which case you've got to provide something. So I think, you know, as I say, we've kind of spent a lot of time thinking through exactly what the things are that would demand some form of workplace, and then of course you work through a process which then helps to clarify that, and then you're able to begin to understand how much space you need, where you need it, and what it needs to do. And I think that's the kind of process that I think, you know, organizations are increasingly want to go through, because the default position has moved. You know, we're now all at home. The question is, what kind of space do we actually need, and how much and where? um, and the answer is unlikely to be what we've already got, interestingly.
yeah, yeah. And as you sort of talk about those different factors, the one element that I think working from home really employees really struggle with is
Mm.
the informal social
Hmm.
cohesion.
Yeah.
How do companies sort of help
Mm.
maintain that sort of the
Mm.
informal connections that can sort of be created in the workplace
Yes.
that
Yeah.
maybe struggling with today?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, to some degree, I mean, clearly there are relationships to develop in the workplace, but I think we have a rather romantic view about what that looks like. I mean, I don't think it's quite as rosy as, you know, we all kind of think. But but I am not one. I'm not one. I'm not a person that thinks that we should just abandon the workplace and we shouldn't have face-to-face communication. I think we absolutely do, and even in our business where we've got everybody working all over the world, we do believe in bringing people together, you know, when we need to. But the when we need to is usually to deal with a very complicated problem, or to deal with something which is social, where we want people to be, you know, build relationships and bond. But we don't need it all the time, you know, and that's the point. You may well want to have a central location so that there's some social activity, socialization, but you may not need it. I may not need to go there all the time. Now, in terms of what are the things that you should be doing or could be doing, you know, to keep your organization together when you're away and make sure there's continued. So, I mean, the sort of things we're doing, for instance, in AWA, we're having regular sort of happy hour things, you know, where we bring everybody to go do some silly stuff like wear daft hats and things. And those are sort of things you can do. You know, you've got to transfer some things online. I mean, the sort of things that we've been doing, for instance, we had about 2 months ago, we had a what we call a knowledge festival. So we had a whole program of social and educational developmental things that we did online with our whole population globally over a week. You know, slots of 90 minutes, very well thought through. Um, and a lot of it was social. It was getting people to get to know each other. We're contemplating doing an open, almost like an open mic thing every day, where in effect we have, half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon, which is like a coffee time. So if people want to come and be part of it, or they've got a problem that they want a bit of help with or something, they can come and we'll use Zoom and we break into groups.
Hmm.
Um, we've just signed up for a thing which is quite cool, which is a thing called Spark Collaboration. And it's a tool which enables us to um, basically put all the emails in it, and you can set them up in groups. We could, for instance, we could do East Coast, West Coast, UK, Europe, and it basically goes about inviting people for coffee. So it's a kind of it's a sort of little trick to get people. No, it's organized so that people sign up for it. So it's all about getting more people to know more people. And there's a very, for us, it's not just sort of altruistic and sociable. It's about getting people to know what people know, because if you look at the research, basically the more people you know well, the more knowledge you have access to, the easier it is for you to work, because people will support you. You can kind of maybe do a little bit of a challenging conversation, but without people feeling that their nose is being put out of joint. But those sorts of things really matter. And there's an idea really that when we're all in the same physical workplace, that just happens naturally. Well, my basic thesis is it doesn't happen. A lot of it doesn't happen. I mean, we're finding from the Advanced Workplace Institute members, when we're doing polls with our members in workshops, people are saying that they feel more connected now to their colleagues and to their organizations than they have done in the past. So we're kind of, actually in many, and of course the other thing is, it's a great level of this, because people who are, you know, working in the office and people who are away, this has been the model in the past where, you come into a Zoom call or a Teams call, there's 6 people in a meeting room, you're one of 3 that is outside, you're instantly at a competitive disadvantage. What all of a sudden we're finding is that everybody's on the same playing field. Everybody's got the opportunity to contribute in exactly the same way. There's a flattening thing going on as well. I mean, I was talking to a client the other day, and she was saying, look, we're doing lots of these all staff briefings using Teams and stuff. And our leaders, who are seen as being on a bit of a pedestal, they're at home with their hoodies, a bit like I am today. Their kids are running around in the back. You can see what what books they read or what fridge magnets they've got. And she said it's really interesting because it's beginning to get people to realize these are just other human beings just like them. And it's kind of reducing the power distance. And she was saying to me that when they do these things in an open forum with the face-to-face gathering, they barely get any questions, because of course it takes a lot of courage to stand and ask a question. And if you're a bit introverted, that plays into, or you're a bit junior, you're not going to put yourself on the line. Whereas what we're finding now is that people are very happy to put something on a chat and come back, and the leader can then answer the question. So it's really interesting. There are some things about what are going on now that are actually better, I think, than what we get in the workplace. Not everything, but the evidence seems to be pushing us in that direction. And so I should say also, not everything for everybody, because I think there are people, particularly at the younger age group, who are finding this a bit more difficult because they don't have the space. They don't, they're a bit stuck, and they actually want the sociability that goes with turning up in a workplace. And actually, in some organisations, they want the support, because the workplace has now got to a point where it delivers their food, even sorts out their dry cleaning. There's a doctor there. There's a lot of support services that people of that age sort of, don't get in any other way, or if they do, they have to work harder at it.
Yeah, and there's so much there to unpack, Andrew. And what's going through my head is, so how do we get at what's working, what's not working? How do we keep what is working, and how do we find a solution for what isn't working? And perhaps that is the office that provides that benefit. But thank you. I appreciate your time as always. Appreciate your insights, and thank you for what you're doing and contributing to Open Source Workplace.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Keep up the good work.
Cheers. Thank you, mate.